Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to another edition of Nickel Press TV. Our new name, of course. Our PR people liked it more, so we're going with that. I'm your host, Doug Moore. We're in Week 13 already. Good God, Week 13 of fantasy football. This week, I'm joined by a very special guest. She's really an up-and-comer, and more famous people follow her than me on Twitter. Jen Ryan writes for Gridiron Experts, among all of her things. Jen, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you for having me. That's quite an introduction.
It's my pleasure. Your publicist told me I had to schedule at least a month in advance. So.
Oh, come on.
No, it's a pleasure to have you on. I wanted to make sure that we got some time in this season, you and I talking. And here we are. We're in Week 13 already. I think you had said something earlier on Twitter today saying it's crazy. This is for most leagues, this is the last regular season week for fantasy leagues, and it's crazy because I'm going to have to go into hibernation soon when fantasy football ends.
It's almost, it feels unfair. It's such a short season.
Yeah, no, you don't know what you have until it's gone, and I get it for 4 months out of the year, and I'm not sure what I'm going to do, but we're going to talk about what we do have. We're going to talk about Week 13 here. Some more big injuries this weekend that happened. Obviously, some more dramatic than others. I think the best way to start off is obviously talking about arguably the biggest injury that happened this weekend. Rob Gronkowski of my Patriots, I have to mention my Patriots, went down with a knee injury. It looked bad. I was watching the game, and I couldn't breathe. But now we're hearing that it's going to be a week-to-week injury. Things have changed over the past 24 to 48 hours, saying day-to-day, week-to-week. So, Jen, I want to ask you, you're the expert here. I'm just the host. About a few things. One, Gronk being out. He's the number one tight end in fantasy football, arguably. Besides my boy Gary Barnidge. And people are arguing all over the place about Scott Chandler. How do you view Scott Chandler? What do you view him, at least this week, in terms of who you're going to get on the waiver wire? And do you think, he could put up some stats in the meantime, put him in that top 10 tight end discussion?
I think he's definitely a waiver wire pick this week. He has to be. And I do like him if Gronk turns out to be a multi-week injury. I don't love the matchup necessarily this week, but, he's available in a bunch of leagues still. He had a touchdown last week. I think he had a touchdown 2 weeks ago. And I think my favorite thing about him is Brady's not afraid to kind of throw it deep to him and take shots down the field. So, if Gronk misses this week, which it's likely that he's obviously going to start. But I almost like him maybe the week after and the week after that.
Yeah, no, he's got a tough matchup this week against the Eagles, who have been really tough against tight ends over the past few weeks. Like you said, he's not a...
Oh, sorry.
No, please continue. No, continue.
That's okay. I think the Eagles, if I'm not mistaken, they've only given up 2 touchdowns to tight ends this season. So I'm kind of like, it backs me off of it a little bit.
You're probably right, honestly. I just was looking earlier today, and I saw, I'm thinking to myself, when I saw the Eagles and their rankings against tight ends, I'm like, oh, God, that's Scott Chandler's territory. But, yeah, no, it's a tough matchup. But I think the best thing we saw is that he had a career high, at least with the Patriots, in targets. He had 11 targets over the weekend. Now, Gronk didn't go down until at least the second half. I can't remember off the top of my head. But can a part of it be contributed to just how little, they had on the offensive side of the ball with, Danny Amendola out, with Julian Edelman out, Chris Harper not doing much, and neither Keyshawn Martin as well. But, yeah, I would have to think that he's going to be an integral part of this team as long as Gronk's out, especially if Michael Williams. Now, a lot of people don't know Michael Williams. He's sort of he's an important cog in that team's tight end depth. The big thing here I would have to think is once Rob Gronkowski, I should say, comes back, his value is going to return to nearly what it was before, which is a boom or bust tight end too. But yeah, concerning, especially the depth this week with just how little there is to pick up on the waiver wire. You'd have to think Scott Chandler is the best add this week for tight ends, which sort of leads us into the and which leads us into our the other major injury. Well, one of the other major injuries that happened this weekend, Jimmy Graham, who, if I'm sure you listen to the show, and everybody else who has listened, thanks, Mom. I've told people to sit Jimmy Graham, I think, 4 times this season. I do not like him in terms of his fantasy prospects, but now you have to like him even less, obviously. Went down with a knee injury over the weekend, a torn patellar tendon in his knee. He's out for the rest of the season. So he's out for the rest of the season now. Obviously, he's droppable in redraft. And this is an injury where we saw Victor Cruz suffer, and obviously he's not played this season. He won't play. It's due to another injury, but still, a lot of players have suffered this injury, and they haven't been the same. So, obviously, besides the fact that he's out for the rest of the season, let's talk about Dynasty for a second. I don't really do this much, but I figured I might. He's coming up on 30. He's coming out. He's going to be having this major surgery. How do you view him in Dynasty? How do you view him for next year potentially? Just off the top of your head now, would you be comfortable still viewing him as a tight end 1 next year? Or just in Dynasty, would you try to trade him, or you probably won't be able to, but how do you view him going forward?
I don't view him as a tight end 1 in Dynasty, and I'm new at Dynasty. This is actually my first season doing it, and I wound up in, I think, 2 or 3 Dynasty leagues. But, so I'm probably not like the best person to ask, but from what I do know, I don't think he was a TE1 this year necessarily. I feel like he kind of burned people a lot in the first round who took him last year. And going forward, given the age and this type of injury, it's so different with ACLs. I feel like you kind of know when someone's going to be back, but this patellar or whatever it is, it's something you really haven't heard of much aside from Victor Cruz, and it doesn't seem very easy to come back to say the least. So I definitely think he's not going to be like a top guy in terms of like dynasty tight ends next season. Especially, you still have younger guys. So
yeah, no, definitely, I have to agree. And this is even harder because this position, this tight end position in fantasy football is long been low, besides defenses and kickers, because it's just so unpredictable. Gary Barnes, my boy, is all of a sudden a top 3 tight end when nobody even heard of him coming into this year. We saw Jimmy Graham suffer a little bit. Antonio Gates has still put up numbers. Jordan Cameron, even though he relocated, didn't do that well. It's just an unpredictable position. Travis Kelce, again, has been underutilized. So it's hard, especially with this type of injury, where you're losing a guy that maybe isn't that good, but he's still, one of the more reliable, I would think, given the right expectation of him. But talking about the Seahawks a little bit, I want to change course a little bit, and that sort of ties in a little bit to talking about waiver wire. At least for me, I like Doug Baldwin a little bit more. Now, and granted, he's got my name. He's got my name. It's not the other way around. He has my name. But, now with Jimmy Graham being out, not that he's been doing much, but he was still a part of this offense. And after we saw what he did on Sunday, granted it was against the horrible Pittsburgh secondary, do you feel at all that Doug Baldwin could at least put up, say, top 30 numbers for the rest of the season with Jimmy Graham out?
Sure, with the opportunity with Graham out and obviously with the upside, he certainly has that. I'm grabbing Doug Baldwin when I can, but I'm almost going a little deeper on the depth chart, and I'm looking at Jermaine Kearse, to kind of get an uptick in targets as well. I feel like he's such a good deep threat, and where they should have been using Jimmy in the end zone with his size, they could really use Kearse. I think he's like 6'1". He's a pretty big guy. And when I checked this morning, on a whim, it turned out he was available in 96% of ESPN leagues, and I just couldn't believe it.
Yeah, that's definitely, and part of the problem, at least with Seattle's offense, or at least their passing game, is it's so unpredictable because we saw Russell Wilson throw for five touchdowns, I think, this week. But then in other weeks he doesn't even throw one, or maybe he throws one if that. It's just it's all dependent on the team.
Yards.
Yeah, it's hard because of just how they mold their scheme. I would have to think, and now granted, I didn't watch the whole game, but I didn't see Thomas Rawls being used a ton. I don't think he's used as much as we usually see out of a running back in Seattle. Now, granted, you might have more about that than I do, and I could be completely wrong, which, according to Twitter, happens every day. But
I mean, it probably felt that way because the week before he had something like over 30 touches. And I think last week, I'm checking out, he had 21 touches. But didn't go over 100 yards. So that probably seems like he wasn't so much involved. But, I mean, the bottom line, Rawls has been really good, but he's not Marshawn Lynch. And Marshawn Lynch is a back that they're going to ride, I guess, so to speak. But, I mean, then again, now that I'm looking at it and thinking about it, he has had 51 attempts in the past 2 games. So he's involved. I guess he's just not, diving into the touchdown as much as Marshawn is.
Yeah, and I think just part of it, the perception of the game is because it's such a high-scoring game, and you saw so many plays with, the pass, whether, like I said, Russell Wilson had 5 touchdowns. If I'm not mistaken, I think he had 5 touchdowns. Or that might have been Jameis Winston. He did, okay. And then
I don't think anyone expected. Sorry, I don't think anyone expected that high score by any means.
No, especially considering just considering that Pittsburgh had been a decent defense against the run, and then also Seattle was supposed to have this Legion of Boom, and they just have not been performing. And all those Seattle fans out there are slowly gathering around my house right now. But
definitely.
It's just, I don't know. It seems like Seattle can be beaten. Not so much beaten, but beaten on defense, too. Yeah.
Yeah, and they have been this year.
Which forces, I think part of the reason why in the past their run game has been so successful is because they were able to keep the score low and be able to, put up 14, maybe 17 points and pull out with a win. And now they can't do that anymore. They have to rack up the score because they have shown that they can be beatable on defense. Now, like I said, it felt like Thomas Rawls hadn't been used as much. He still got over 20 touches, but, granted, compared to, I think, the week before, you had said over 30. So it depends on just the matchup itself. So, but by the way, Thomas Rawls, if you haven't picked him up, go get him. I guess I have to throw that in there.
Sure, and whatever league it is that he's available in, I would love to get in it next year because I can't imagine.
I was going to say, let's put $50 on it. Let's put $100 on it. I'll go against them. I want to talk about another rookie running back, and that's probably the biggest waiver wire pickup this week by far, I would think, and that's David Johnson. Talking about other injuries, Chris Johnson, not David Johnson, Chris Johnson suffered what is now being called a fractured tibia. So basically, he broke his ankle. He broke the bone, the leg bone near his ankle. He's going to be out. No, he won't be back until at least the Super Bowl, and that's wishful thinking. So he's out for the rest of the season. Andre Ellington is dealing with turf toe, a sprained toe, and his status for this week is questionable at best, which leaves David Johnson. Now, I would have to think that, especially in PPR leagues, given his receiving ability, he's an automatic, I would think, top 25 at worst in terms of where you can put him starting even this week. So I want to ask you, am I crazy to think that, well, one, I would assume you have to pick him up, but two, am I crazy to think he's automatically startable in not only every PPR league, but almost every other league as well?
No, I don't think that's crazy at all. The running back pool is so thin at this point, and now you have a guy who, 2 people, there's of 3 people out of the 2 of them are hurt. They had to call up Kerwin Williams from the practice squad. So, talk about opportunity, and on top of that, he's very talented, and his limited touches and his limited opportunities, it kind of seems like every time the ball is in his hand, he's doing something special with it.
Yeah, no, especially given this offense where I think it's at the very worst top 5 in scoring per game, he's going to have plenty of opportunities, whether it's in the running game or in the receiving game as well, because apparently now Carson Palmer has 4 receivers to throw to, now including all of a sudden J.J. Nelson, who I don't even understand, but hey, next thing you know, Jerron Brown will be a wide receiver 1 as well. But yeah, I would have to think, just considering how much they, how well they do on offense, and given Johnson's just explosive talent, he would have to be someone that you not only pick up, but if you're lucky to pick him up, you'd put him in there at least at your running back too. I think I saw on Yahoo, at least for my PPR league, one of my PPR leagues, he was ranked like 5th in projected points this week.
Wow.
Crazy how well he could do. Now, I wouldn't go as far as to say he's number 2 potentially for running backs this week, but no, I would have to think, especially considering we're going to have at least one less Cardinal running back for the rest of the season, and who knows with Andre Ellington when he can actually come back. If he doesn't come back week 13, David Johnson's the guy. So
yeah, and there's really not a ton of competition for touches either.
No, there really isn't, because they just brought up Kerwin Williams, and Kerwin Williams hasn't done much. I think when Andre Ellington was down last season, he filled in a few games and didn't do much. It's just that's a depth thing. David Johnson has the chance to be a lead back, and especially with Andre Ellington's injuries in the past, Chris Johnson's age, David Johnson can really seal himself to get a starting role next season, I would think, if he does well enough with this chance. So I don't see any reason why he wouldn't go out there and give it his all.
No.
But yeah, I would have to think no problem.
The only thing that might concern me about him is the coach endorsing him, because I feel like Bruce Arians has kind of messed with us before in the past. Whenever he says a player is going to get more involved or get this many touches, he goes the opposite way. So the superstition in me is like, I hate that Bruce Arians had to say anything. I think today he said he was our lead guy and, he's more than ready for the role. And I was like, oh, don't curse it, Bruce.
No, he told us he doesn't care about our fantasy team. So maybe he knows all this is happening, and we're going to get Kerwin Williams getting 30 touches. But who knows? Maybe it's better if he says David Johnson's going to do bad. Maybe then we'll have more hope. But yeah, no, you do bring up a good point, especially, that run situation has been cloudy all season. Chris Johnson did get most of the work, but then you see Andre Ellington do something, and then David Johnson somehow gets a touchdown somewhere or somehow. But now I think he really has a chance to do well.
He's my top waiver ad this week for sure.
Yeah, by far. But for me, a guy who's it's completely understandable. He's flown under the radar, and he has consistently for the past 2 weeks been putting up great numbers in the absence of Carlos Hyde. That's Sean Drone. Now, granted, he's a career journeyman, but for some reason, and I stress this with the highest amount of, somehow, he's doing well. He was actually the only 49ers running back to get touches last week. He has had 20 touches in the past 2 games, and he has had 13 receptions also in the past 2 games. He had 8 last week and 5 this week. And he finished with at least 80 yards in both of those games. Now, Jim Tomsula said that it's a strong possibility that Carlos Hyde might be out for the rest of the season, which could only mean good things for Sean Drone owners, which, as I checked this morning in Yahoo, there's about 3/4 of leagues, so about 75% of leagues don't own him. So I don't know about you, but I'm a big PPR nut. So seeing this, seeing how he's gotten, 13 catches in the past 2 weeks, it's crazy. And I would have to think, especially now with Blaine Gabbert all of a sudden doing well, or better, I should say, at quarterback for San Francisco, it's going to keep turning out this way. Sean Drone is by far the lead back in San Francisco, and he has done nothing to lose that job. So I don't know about you, but I think he's even worthy of just above that running back 3 position in PPR League to maybe a 20 to 24 range in terms of weekly running backs in PPR. I don't know about you, but I want to get your opinion about that.
No, I 100% agree. And you mentioned his 13 receptions last week, over the past 2 weeks. They also went for 75 yards. That's pretty much what you're looking for in a PPR running back. But I gotta say, his success, I guess I would say, it's not all that neat, only because I feel like a lot of times when you have a backup quarterback who's used to running with the second string, have players from his second string around him on the field, I feel like they tend to gravitate towards them a little bit. So with the, benching of Kaepernick and then the injury to Hyde, to see this with Sean Drone, it makes a little bit of sense to me because all the time they must spend together. But he was such a hot pickup last week, and I wish he wasn't because I would have loved to have grabbed him. He was gone in all my leagues, but you just said 75%. I mean, if he's still out there, you kind of have to get him. I mean, he's the lead dog, and you don't have a lot of that left at this point in the season. They're dropping every week, the running back, so definitely got to grab him.
Yeah, no, and exactly. You bring up a great point exactly with those. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but no, you bring up a great point with the running backs are dropping like flies.
Yeah.
So you got to find the right ones. You got to find that's what makes or breaks some teams right now. And I think as long as Blaine Gabbert's playing quarterback, and I never thought in any world I'd ever say that, I think Sean Drone can put up at least top 25 value in PPR leagues. Like I said, and I saw this stat, I think yesterday, he was the only running back that got touches.
Yeah.
So he's literally, there's nobody else.
I saw that he played all 56 offensive snaps, did not come out for a play. And, I mean, could you ask for anything better than that? A running back who's, like you said, getting every single touch.
Yeah, there's just nobody there. I think I read Mike Davis, the rookie from South Carolina, had 24 rushing yards in 25 attempts this season. I don't even know who their third stringer is. My boy Jared Hayne, I should say, is on the practice squad, I think. There's just nobody else. Reggie Bush is out for the season with a torn ACL. Carlos Hyde, he probably isn't coming back this season with that stress fracture in his foot. Sean Drone is going to keep doing what he does, especially with the 49ers offense at least being relevant.
Sure.
And for me...
And to his credit,
definitely.
He's playing really well. Yeah, he's playing really well.
Yeah, he's had 20 touches the past 2 weeks combined. Each of the last 2 weeks. But can't talk enough. I can't talk all the time about Sean Drone. I wanted to get into actually another 49er who in the past 2 weeks has put up consecutive 93-yard performances, and that's Anquan Bolden. He was still available in over 40% of Yahoo leagues as of this morning. It just seems like Blaine Gabbert has gone to him all the time. He has gotten 19 targets over the past 2 weeks and 13 receptions, which, is 6.5 receptions and almost 10 targets a game. Hasn't scored many touchdowns, and that's probably the only thing that's going to hold him back from putting up better numbers and being a guy that not only you pick up but could throw in as your flex every week. It's just there's not going to be a lot of scoring opportunities. But in PPR leagues, especially like I talked about, where you're getting so many targets and receptions like Drone, I would have to think that he's someone that at the worst you keep on your bench, where he could have a really good matchup and you think this guy could go for a touchdown or maybe 80 yards or even more. Just considering I don't have the target share numbers in front of me, but I know that he has the most targets over the past 2 weeks, I think, besides Sean Drone in terms of targets. So I wanted to, I guess, get your opinion again on it. But I know Anquan Bolden's more known, at least in fantasy circles, because he's owned over half of Yahoo leagues. But if he's still available, you have to get him, right?
Oh, absolutely. If he's still available, you have to get him. And I think he's maybe even going forward. Those last two games that you mentioned where he put up back-to-back games in 93 yards, those were tough opponents. He was at Seattle, and then he had Arizona. So for him to kind of, I guess, do that sort of damage against those tougher teams, when the schedule opens up, it's escaping my mind right now who he has this week. But
Chicago.
Oh, Chicago. Well, if Anquan can't score this week, I think he'll, for him to put up those numbers against Seattle and Arizona, I think it's shown that he can, I would imagine, put up, if not the same or better stat line against Chicago. And think about his PPR scoring if there was a touchdown on top of it. It's like a 20-plus point game. 20-point-plus game.
Yeah, no, I think I did the math on my article. I'm going to plug here at Bro Jackson. Go check it out. Waiver Wire Frenzy. And we'll have time for you to plug, I promise.
No.
In a weekly average over the past 2 weeks, 6.5 receptions and 93 yards in PPR leagues, that comes out to 15.8 points, which I would have to think at the worst is wide receiver 2 numbers. Now, granted, it's a small sample size, 2 games, but those have both been with a new quarterback. At least those 2 full games have been with a new quarterback. So I'd have to think at the worst, we're looking at double-digit points every week from him, whether it's by reception or by yards or even a touchdown out of the blue. And like you said, he is facing Chicago, and he's faced Seattle and Arizona the past 2 weeks, which have much better secondaries than Chicago. So if he can do that against those 2 teams, I have to agree with you in thinking that if he can do that, he can do, if not that, but better in Chicago this week. And I don't have his other games in front of me, but yeah, he's got certainly a better matchup this week than the past 2 weeks.
Sure. And if that's his floor, then, if you want to use the 2-game sample size as his floor, then you're in business this week. And next week, he has Cleveland the week after.
Yeah, definitely. That's a great floor. And I've always liked Anquan Boldin. I don't know. There's just always been something. And when he went to San Francisco, he was going into, I don't know, I never thought it was an ideal situation. He dealt with Michael Crabtree. He dealt with, just turmoil at the quarterback position, whether it was, I think he played with Alex Smith, and then he played with Colin Kaepernick, who didn't really throw a ton. And then you always had Vernon Davis to worry about. Now you have Torrey Smith as well.
Torrey Smith,
yeah. So who doesn't do much, but he'll go and steal a touchdown from you on some 70-yard bomb for some reason. I think he had a touchdown this past week, or he had a really good catch or something. So talking about the last guy I want to talk about, and this is a guy for seasons I thought was going to really break out. I think at the beginning of last season I thought he was going to break out with North Turner being his offensive coordinator, who loves tight ends. Kyle Rudolph has burned me a little bit. He was borderline droppable for not too long ago, and now he's putting up about the same numbers that we just talked about for Anquan Boldin. And if you can put up numbers like that as a tight end, that's even better. He has put up over the past 2 games 19 targets, which is the most on the team, more than Adrian Peterson, more than Mike Wallace, more than Stephon Diggs, more than anybody. 13 receptions, 159 yards, and a touchdown. I mean, I don't know. I mean, we're sort of dealing with the same situation in Minnesota that we're dealing with talking about Doug Baldwin earlier. It's a run-first team where we have a quarterback who, not the most, he's not going to go and throw 300 yards every week, or even some weeks he's not even going to throw 200. But Teddy Bridgewater seems to trust him. And I think I actually used as a reason in my article that if Adrian Peterson keeps running the ball and gets them down the field and gets them into the red zone potentially, and they have to pass, I would have to think that Kyle Rudolph is their number 1 red zone target by far. It's undoubted. He's got amazing size. He's got great hands. It's just he's dealt with injuries and just, I don't know, he just never had that rapport with Teddy Bridgewater. But he's still available in over half of Yahoo leagues. And like I said, I think he's, especially with these injuries where Gronk, Graham, I would have to think that Kyle Rudolph, you can go and pick up and put him in as a streamer even, after him being borderline droppable for most of the season. So I wanted to ask you, is this I need some clarification here. Is this a fluke, or is this for real?
You're talking to someone who was kind of in the same boat with you, drafted Kyle Rudolph in more than 1 league, burned me, dropped him. But I will say, I do like what he's done the past 2 weeks. I don't know if he's starting to put it together, or if it's Teddy Bridgewater that's starting to put it together, but whatever it is, the chemistry that I think we saw a little bit in the beginning of the preseason appears to be back. I hope it's for real. I'm not going to I'm not going to say for sure if it is, but I think in terms of a streamer, I really, really like him, and I like him this week, actually, against Seattle. Most people, they're kind of nervous when you see a team playing them, but they're actually pretty friendly to tight ends. They've given up, I think, over double digits on average each week to tight ends in scoring, 7 touchdowns, and Teddy is targeting Rudolph a lot, and he's targeting where it counts down near the red zone, so I like him this week, and I think really the rest of the season he's got a pretty nice schedule. I mean, he sees Chicago in week 15, and then he has the Giants in the Fantasy Super Bowl, which is a great matchup.
Yeah, and besides the Panthers, the Vikings are red hot right now. They've won 7 straight, and they're Adrian Peterson has put up, I think, 200 yards, 120 yards, or whatever it is. So I think this is, like I said, a run-based team, but just everything is clicking for them. And I would love to see this keep up, especially after they signed Rudolph. I think, if I'm not mistaken, over the past offseason to a big contract. He's for a tight end. So you have to figure they're going to have to get their money's worth eventually. And I would have to hope, and I don't want to rip out my hair here going crazy about him because I got to temper this. But I would have to think, or would have to hope more like it, that he can at least put up these type of numbers consistently, especially for the rest of the season. Maybe he's hit a hot streak. Maybe, Teddy Bridgewater has to throw to other people more than just Stephon Diggs. Who knows? But I just want it to stay. I want it to keep up. I don't want this to change. I don't want it to change. I'm a Kyle Rudolph. What do they call him? Apologist? I don't even know.
Sure.
I don't know.
Apologist.
Sure. Yeah. I don't know. I'm going to Kyle Rudolph meetings. I don't know. I don't even know.
The truth meetings. Yeah.
Yeah. Truth or meetings. There we go. But I've sort of been spitting out names for Waiver Wire ads this week. I wanted to ask your opinion. I know I didn't touch on the quarterback position, but feel free to mention anybody that I forgot to or you think should be mentioned. Any on your end that you think, from what you've seen or what you've been able to just discover that deserves to be picked up this week?
Yeah, definitely. In terms of quarterback, you got Jay Cutler and both Ryan Fitzpatrick just sitting out there in over 70% of ESPN leagues. And I don't know what, especially people who stream the quarterback, I don't know why both these guys really aren't owned. I mean, Fitzpatrick had a huge game last week. He's got 2 of, the top receivers in the game. And he has a really nice schedule coming up. He has the Giants, even though he's a visiting team in his own stadium, and then Tennessee and Dallas before he faces New England. And just with Marshall and Decker and everything that offense has put together this season, it really surprised me he's not more owned. And really, same thing with Cutler. Cutler's been turning it up lately. He's been playing really well.
Yeah, no, I think I've seen so many Bears fans say we need a new quarterback. We should draft Jared Goff or whoever it is. And I'm thinking to myself, especially with such a lack of consistent talent at the quarterback position, whether it's from the draft or just free agents out there, I would think that to be pretty lucky to have someone like Jay Cutler as opposed to a team like Cleveland, where they just can't seem to catch a break anywhere, especially watching that game last night. Yeah, I don't even know. And then San Francisco, and I can name 10 more. The Cowboys, obviously, where you dropped so much from Tony Romo to, first Brandon Weeden, now Matt Castle. Such a drop in talent where you're not going to find anybody. And I would think, especially they got him locked up long term, and even with Alshon Jeffrey being out, Martellus Bennett was out this past week, he's still putting up numbers. I don't have the exact numbers on in front of me, but yeah, definitely. Jay Cutler is he's consistent, but he's not going to give you overwhelming numbers, at least most weeks. But he's definitely, like you said, turning it up lately.
Yeah, I feel like he gets no respect, really. He's had 2 down weeks, but tough opponents, and he has San Francisco this week, which, that's a pretty nice matchup for him. And you got to think if in these next couple of weeks between really this week, next week, throughout your playoffs, is healthy this week. If Alshon Jeffrey, he's playing, but maybe he's not 100%. If Martellus Bennett, if he has everything around him this week, next week, maybe the week after, he could be a really nice playoff quarterback for fantasy purposes.
Yeah, definitely. If he's at full strength where he's got a reliable receiver, even at less than 100% in Alshon Jeffrey, he's got a tight end that, has proven to be a force in the passing game when he's actually throwing to. He also got Matt Forte, like you said, and also Jeremy Langford, who's been really, really awesome in the receiving game, even lining up as a receiver sometimes. So, yeah, I would have to think, this Chicago team, I think, defied expectations. They were projected to be maybe what the Ravens are, with 1 or 2 wins, and they I think they're still below 500, but I think they've done pretty well considering. And then you also brought up Ryan Fitzpatrick, who, yeah, definitely, I actually mentioned him this week, and I actually thought about putting him in my my must starts this week, considering he's going up against a Giants team that gave up over 300 yards and a touchdown to Kirk Cousins. But yeah, 4 touchdowns, almost 300 yards with Decker and Marshall, and then you have Chris Ivory, just keeping a stable running game. I would have to think that, yeah, if everybody's healthy, same with Jay Cutler, that, he could do really well. Like you said, he has a pretty good matchup schedule for the rest of the season in terms of fantasy. So, yeah. Now, it's sort of the same thing in fantasy as it is in the NFL, where there's just a lack of top-end talent or even mid-tier talent at the total quarterback position, which has been a disappointment this season, a really big disappointment, actually, considering Andrew Luck, Aaron Rodgers have both done horrible. Not horrible, I'm sorry. Aaron Rodgers hasn't been
performing up to expectation. I think
the expectations that were set for him, he has not met, no. And then also, Peyton Manning, obviously. Now, granted, some didn't think he was going to do well, but among most, he was still viewed as a top 5 quarterback in fantasy. And then, you got Tom Brady doing well. Derek Carr, all of a sudden, is a top 10 quarterback. Tyrod Taylor started off hot, and then he got injured. Phillip Rivers has started off really hot, but then he's just been losing weapons, and it's suffered a little bit. But yeah, there's just something going on with the quarterback position and tight end position this season. Hell, the running backs situation too. And I don't even want to get started on that. That was just horrible, just what we've seen this season. But want to move into our last segment of the show, and we're actually making great time here. I know you and I talked beforehand how just we talk and we talk and we talk and we never get enough time. But I think we're actually making good time.
It's easy to get chatty.
It is. It definitely is. Going into our must-starts and must-sits for Week 13, for those who don't know, we talk about a quarterback, a running back, a wide receiver, and a tight end for both start and sit that we like or don't like this week, and we say why. I'll start first, obviously, in case, I always start first anyway. But starting with the must-starts, I'm going to talk about the quarterback position. And I would have to think that most people would start him anyway, but just given this matchup, there shouldn't be a leap. Even if you have a Tom Brady, you sit him for this guy. That's Cam Newton, who's been a revelation this season. 183 yards, no touchdown through the air, but he ran for 45 yards and a touchdown against, I wrote down Carolina, and that's obviously wrong because he plays with Carolina. Darn it. But facing New Orleans, by far, over the past at least 5 weeks, he's given up the most points to the quarterbacks. They've given up 16 touchdowns, passing touchdowns, over the past 4 weeks. That is 4 a game. That's 4 a game. That is ridiculous. And they've also given up over 300 yards per game as well. And just, I don't even understand. Cam Newton wasn't supposed to do well. He wasn't supposed to do this well, at least. He lost Kelvin Benjamin. His best receivers are Ted Ginn, Jericho Cotchery, Philly Brown, and Devin Funchess have been up and down. He's been doing pretty well recently. And, Greg Olsen. He wasn't supposed to do this well. He wasn't. But somehow he has. And just this matchup this week. Usually he's a must-start for most weeks, but yeah, there shouldn't be a league where he is not starting this week. this matchup, how he's been playing, you have to start him. But what about you? What about quarterback that you tell people to start this week, that you have to start this?
Well, I would like to go on the record that I am 100% with you when it comes to Cam Newton. In fact, I think he easily has the upside to finish as this week's top quarterback. But a must-start guy for me is the one we just talked about, Ryan Fitzpatrick against the Giants. He's had one terrible fantasy game this week, and I always judge like absolutely awful by his single-digit performance. And he's had just one. And granted, he's had 4 picks in his last 4 games, but he's also put up 9 touchdowns. And the Giants' secondary is pretty weak, and I should see no reason with Decker and Marshall why he can't completely pick them apart. They're, I think, one of the top wide receiver duos in the league, and Fitzpatrick's a smart quarterback. He makes smart decisions. I think he's going to look to kind of be the king of New York this Sunday.
Yeah, no, it's just they're hurt so much, that Giants defense, and they just, like you said, I think they're arguably one of the best, if not up there at the best in terms of wide receiver duos. You know, Fitzpatrick is healthy now. For the most part, you know, obviously he had thumb surgery, which is non-throwing hand. But yeah, like I said, if the Giants can give up 300 yards and a touchdown to Kirk Cousins, I can only imagine when they give up to Ryan Fitzpatrick with the weapons he has.
I love
that pick that week.
Yeah, he's. I'm excited to see him this week and see what he does.
Yeah. In terms of running backs this week, this was a guy that most didn't own before a week ago tomorrow, before waiver wires last week. But now he's my must start this week. That's Buck Allen. I can't see that far away. 12 rushes, 55 yards, which is almost 5 a carry. 4 catches on 5 targets, 29 yards and a touchdown. Over 80 yards and a touchdown against Cleveland. But he's got a terrific matchup this week against Miami. Miami has given up 135 yards on average to running backs the past 5 games. 6 touchdowns rushing in the past 5 games. 5 rushing, 1 receiving. And they're giving up 52 yards on average in the passing game, receiving to running backs. Buck Allen, he can catch, he can run, and there's nobody behind him that's really going to do much. Terrence Ross, I think, got like 4 carries or 5 carries. He's a change of pace guy. But Buck Allen has a terrific matchup. He got, 16 touches. I love this matchup, and I love his role, even with Matt Schaub at quarterback. And I think that we could see Buck Allen going for 100 yards from scrimmage at least, and a touchdown, whether it's receiving or rushing. But what about you? What about that running back that you're telling people to start this week?
Well, I have my obvious ones, but up there for me is definitely Jonathan Stewart, simply based off the volume he's been seeing lately, and he's got this really, really nice matchup against New Orleans. But I kind of have like a bold, sort of out on the limb running back that I'm not telling everybody that they must start him, but considering it's the last week of the fantasy season, you probably drafted this guy pretty high. I think you kind of have to go out on the limb and give Lamar Miller a shot. I know it's a tough matchup, but his past 2 games, they barely used him, and I feel like that might have cost the offensive coordinator his job. Right after that first coaching game, when Dan Campbell was in the coach, they came out and they fed Lamar Miller, and he was producing when he was getting those double-digit carries. Part of me just feels like they're just going to go back to that this week because that's what was working for them. It's such a risky play, but it's the last week, you know. You got to go big or go home, I guess. But that's, like I said, he's somebody that I'm starting in multiple leagues. Do it at your own risk, but it's almost like my dark horse this week, I guess, for like bounce back game when he needs it. But aside from him, I'd say one of my favorite matchups for running backs is Jonathan Stewart.
Yeah, that New Orleans is just giving up points to everybody. I think D'Angelo Williams is still getting points.
Yeah.
Running against him, and he doesn't even play for the Panthers anymore. I think he'll still get points against the Saints this week. But yeah, no, I think I read today honestly that Bill Lazor, the offensive coordinator for the Dolphins that was fired because he wasn't running the ball enough. And that's what they're going to do.
So I really I own him in one of my big money leagues, and I've been starting him and hoping that he'll be fine. But it's reassuring that they are going to literally focus on the run game more, because they've been most successful when their run game is doing well, and they just lost our number 2 receiver for probably the rest of the season, Rashad Matthews, who suffered, I think, broken ribs. So, when you go from, losing a starting wide receiver, firing an offensive coordinator because they don't run enough, a lot of these signs are adding up to Lamar Miller having a bounce-back game, I hope. But I certainly think he'll get more touches than he has been. So,
and like I said, it's risky, especially with Jay Ajayi sort of coming on. But I just have this, I guess, feeling, if you want to call it, that they're going to go back to what worked. And Lamar Miller was working when they were giving him the ball. And I'd really like to see him, get a few targets in the passing game.
Yeah, definitely. So, again, this is probably for my wide receiver that must start this week. If he's playing, I would think that most people are going to start him. But, again, this is an overwhelming matchup, and considering the injury we talked about earlier. Danny Amendola is my must-start this week. Now, granted, he from everything I've heard, he is projected to play this week. They decided at the last second not to play him this past weekend. And with Gronk out and them releasing Chris Harper, it's more reassuring that they're going to put Danny Amendola back in the game this week. And he's put up numbers, when Julian Edelman went out. But he's facing Philadelphia in half PPR scoring. Over the past 5 weeks, they've given up the second most points per game to wide receivers. They have actually given up, and I can't believe this is actually true, 11 touchdowns to wide receivers in the past 2 games. Now, Amendola is more known for just racking up catches and yards, but this is a Tom Brady anger game, and maybe only New Englanders truly believe this, but he when he gets angry, he goes out and throws for 405 touchdowns. I'm not saying that's what's going to happen, but this Philadelphia team has given up, I think, 5 passing touchdowns the past 2 games consecutively, and now they're going to face Tom Brady, who's mad.
Really?
And I just think that, and if Gronk isn't playing, I seriously think Amendola will get double-digit catches, triple-digit receiving yards, and 1, if not 2, touchdowns. It's almost a sure thing for me. But 11 touchdowns in the past 4 games to wide receivers. It's crazy. You have to start him. Even at 50%, you got to start him. What about you for your wide receiver this?
Oh,
I'm sorry.
I was going to say, I actually love that Amendola call. I think it's a great call. Would not surprise me in the least that if he had like 18 targets on top of everything else too. I mean, who else is Brady going to really throw to? But me, I'm kind of looking at Amari Cooper this week. He hasn't scored a touchdown since week 9. He's kind of been on a downtread a little bit. You've seen Crabtree get more involved, and then last week out of nowhere, Seth Roberts just comes and scores 2 touchdowns. But he's got a really nice matchup this week against the Kansas City secondary. And I'm really looking for him to get into the end zone this week. And as far as, in fantasy terms, the Chiefs are I think the second worst defense against receivers. So, I'm definitely playing him in a couple of my dailies this week, and I'm really high on Cooper this week.
Yeah, he went over for 100 yards this past weekend, and just Derek Carr has been something else this season. I would have to say that Crabtree and Cooper have been a big reason for that. But my must-start tight end this week is actually going to be Julius Thomas. I never thought I would say this because I don't like him, but he did really well against San Diego. 10 targets, 9 catches, 116 yards, and a touchdown. Now, reaching a little bit deep here, Tennessee has given up the 9th most points to tight ends over the past 5 weeks per game in half PPR leagues. They've given up 4 touchdowns in the past 5 weeks. Thomas, I can't even read my own writing. Thomas has scored in consecutive weeks, and Allen Hurns might be out this week. He was in the hospital. He suffered a concussion, and this guy has just taken every known injury to man, and I think he might actually sit out this game. And if that happens, you would have to think that Julius Thomas's role gets expanded a little bit.
So my must start this week is going to be Julius Thomas. What about you for your tight end?
Mine is going to be Delaney Walker. Over his past two, he's had 18 targets, turned them into 14 catches, 200 yards. He's kind of just become the de facto wide receiver one in Tennessee, and I think very quietly has become, he's the tight end 5 in PPR scoring, which is kind of surprising. You wouldn't really think for Delaney to be a top 5 tight end. But he's just getting a ton of volume, and if he hits the end zone this week, I can't even imagine the stat line he's going to put up number-wise in PPR scoring.
Yeah, no, he literally he's the number one guy to throw to in Tennessee. There's DGB has not been doing consistent work. Kendall Wright has been underperforming. Justin Hunter's out for the rest of the season. Their run game. But yeah, no, Delaney Walker's the number one guy, and he's been doing really well all season. Moving over to the sits, I'm gonna talk about our quarterback first, and I'm actually gonna tell people to sit Drew Brees this week. 228 yards and 0 touchdowns with an interception against Houston. Facing Carolina. Carolina over the past 5 games has given up 8 touchdowns, but they've also gotten 9 interceptions. I have this weird stat line, their average over the past 5 games. But just say this, over the past 5 games on average, let's see, Houston's average score for quarterbacks is 12.32 points. I can explain the math later if I have to, but 12.32 points, which is not good for quarterbacks. That's like 15th. And he's thrown for 5 touchdowns and 4 interceptions over the past 3 games. He's not producing, and I don't like this matchup at all for him this week. So I'm actually going to tell people I'm going to be a little bold. You got to sit Drew Brees this week and go get Ryan Fitzpatrick. What about you for your must-sit quarterback this week?
I'm getting a little bold with you, and I'm going to tell people to sit Blake Bortles this week. He has Tennessee. He just saw them 2 weeks ago, and they held him to his worst game of the season. He finished with 9 points. The game plan is fresh. They know what to do to shut down Blake Bortles. They just did it. And really, with the possibility of Hearns missing this game, too, I just like him even less. Yeah, no, especially with Allen Hearns potentially being out and Tennessee secretly doing well in defense. Yeah, I don't like this matchup either for him this week. Going to the running backs now, I'm actually going to tell people to sit LaShawn McCoy this week, even with Carlos Williams probably out this week. He had a good game. He had over 100 yards and a touchdown against Kansas City, but he's facing Houston. Houston has given up 0 touchdowns over the past 4 weeks to running backs. 4 games to running backs, and they've only given up 3.9 yards per carry. I don't like this matchup this week for him. I think Houston has really been turning it on lately. I think if I'm not mistaken, they beat New Orleans. And I don't know. I think that defense might be turning a corner. And I don't think LaShawn McCoy, with no touchdowns given up, when they face, Mark Ingram even, I don't like his matchup this week. What about you for your running back this week that you tell people to sit? I'm telling people to sit Latavius Murray, and I'm personally sitting Latavius Murray in 2 of my leagues. He's just been burning people lately. He's had 4 straight weeks of just terrible games. And this week, the last week, fantasy playoffs against the Kansas City run defense, I'm not going to rely on him to either clinch me a bye or get me into the playoffs. I'm definitely looking elsewhere. I'm actually considering in 1 league starting Antonio Andrews over him.
Wow. You heard it here, folks. She prefers Antonio Andrews to Latavius Murray.
I've been scorned by him.
No, but he has not done. I don't own any shares of him. But, he had a hot start to the season, got hurt a little bit, but he has not been doing well. I think I told people to sit him last week, actually, if I'm not mistaken. He just has not been doing well. My must-sit wide receiver this week is actually going to be Stevie Johnson. He had a good game. He had 7 catches, 92 yards, and a touchdown against Jacksonville. But he gets to face Denver now. Denver has given up the second fewest points to wide receivers over the past 5 weeks per game in half PPR leagues. I got to find a short way to say that. They have given up 0 touchdowns to wide receivers over the past 5 games. And they have given up in the past 5 games, 474 yards receiving, 2 wide receivers. That is 94.8 yards. That's all wide receivers. So they've only given up that many yards and no touchdowns over the past 5 weeks. I think that they're going to put their best coverage on Stevie Johnson, and they're going to hope that maybe Antonio Gates goes for 3 touchdowns or something. But I hate this matchup this week for Stevie Johnson, considering he's really the only one there for San Diego and Phillip Rivers, who I'd also recommend sitting this week after, he did horrible, not this past Sunday, but the week before when he had tough competition. So Stevie Johnson sit this week. What about you for your wide receiver this week?
Wide receiver, I'm sitting, and this is only if you can afford to sit him, but if you can, I'm sitting Mike Evans this week. I hate the matchup against the Falcons. They're a really good secondary. I think with Vincent Jackson back healthy, he's really eaten into his targets. I don't like this matchup, and that's all I can kind of really say about it. I just think there's too much, I guess, of the pie being spread around in Tampa Bay, and if you're kind of looking for a 20-point game from Mike Evans this week, I just don't see it getting it in Atlanta.
Yeah, I think that when I was picking these guys out earlier today, Atlanta is actually the only team doing better than Denver against wide receivers. I think they're actually
the best team.
Yep, definitely. So it's a tough matchup, and like you said, with Vincent Jackson back in, I think he scored in the past 2 games since coming back, or at least one of those games. He has been really eating into what Mike Evans could have, and having all those drops doesn't help either. So I'm tugging at your heartstrings a little bit with my must-sit tight end this week. Hasn't been really that fancy relevant.
I think we might have the same guy, but
go. I wouldn't blame you if you did, but I know you're a big Cowboys fan, and you know how Cowboys fans, for the most part, hate me, but this won't help. Jason Witten is who I'm telling people to sit this week at the tight end position. Facing Washington, they've given up the 9th fewest points over the past 5 weeks to tight ends. He has not scored since week 1. He had 2 touchdowns in week 1. He has not scored since. And he has not gone over 50 yards receiving in the since week 7, which is, I think, 4 or 5 games. I don't know if I have to say more about it. I'm sure you have something else, but yeah, you got to sit Jason Witten.
If you can even believe it, and this is coming from probably the biggest Cowboys fan you know, I'm not just telling you to sit Jason Witten this week. I think you kind of have to drop him at this point.
Yeah, I was thinking that, but I didn't want to say it. It's
fine. I mean, for Tony Romo's dead. Matt Castle is Matt Castle. And, I mean, the schedule is just not very good. I mean, they travel to Green Bay. You're talking it could easily be a 20-degree outdoor game. Then they're back home against the Jets, and then they travel again out to Buffalo. I can't imagine a scenario where you're going to start Jason Witten ever again this season and love him to death, but drop him. He's just going to eat up space on your bench.
Yeah, he's even in a horrible tight end position where there's just not enough production. He's right there at the bottom. He just hasn't been doing much. But that will do it for us here this week. I sincerely enjoyed having you on, Jen. It was a pleasure. Be sure to follow her work at Gridiron Experts and also with Fantasy Pros. Jen, you have an awesome Twitter name. Why don't you tell everybody where they can find you on Twitter?
Sure, it's at FFDegenerate, spelled with a J, DEJENERATE.
And not that it matters much, but the Jen is actually capitalized. Be sure to check out. Be sure to check out the new Hanging Einstein episode with Mike Taglieri this week, joining Andy Singleton over at the Nickel Press. Be sure to follow me on Twitter at DMoreNFL. Good luck this week. I think we have 15 seconds left. Jen, any more shout-outs you want to make? Any shout-outs you want to make to anybody?
Yeah, to you. Thanks a lot. Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it.
I don't know if I could hear you. That shout-out was far away, but it was a pleasure having you on. I think we have 3 seconds. Have a good week, everybody.